Are you out of your mind? Where is the television I just bought last week? I stood paralyzed in the middle of the living room, my hands trembling and my heart pounding so hard I felt it would burst out of my chest. There, in the spot where my new flat-screen television had been, sat that hideous old tube TV from the early 2000s, the one that belonged to my daughter-in-law, Jessica. I took it for my wife. She deserves more than you. And stop being so dramatic. Go finish up that meatloaf. My son, Ryan, said it with a calmness that chilled my blood, as if he had just commented on the weather. An hour later, he would realize he had made the biggest mistake of his life. But let me tell you how I got to that moment. My name is Eleanor. I am 71 years old, and exactly 4 months and 3 days ago, I buried the man who was my partner for 47 years. My husband died of a massive heart attack while watering the plants in the garden. He fell among the hydrangeas he cared for so much, and I could only hold his cold hand while we waited for the ambulance that arrived far too late. Since that day, the house became a strange place, filled with heavy silences and memories that crushed my chest every morning when I woke up. I lived alone in that 2-story house we bought when Ryan was just a little boy. Every corner held a story. The mark on the wall where we measured his height every birthday, the kitchen window where my husband drank coffee while reading the newspaper, the worn-out armchair where we spent afternoons watching old movies. After his death, I tried to maintain my routines. I would get up early, make coffee for 2 out of habit, and clean rooms that no one used. But the loneliness was like a living animal, breathing in every corner. Ryan would visit me once a month, maybe less. He always arrived in a hurry, looking at his phone, telling me he had important meetings, urgent projects. He married Jessica 3 years ago, and since then the visits became shorter, colder. She never came into the house. She would stay in the car, waiting, as if my home were a contaminated place. I tried not to think about it too much. I told myself they were busy, that modern life was like this, that young people had their own priorities. 2 weeks ago, I made a decision. I had saved for months, putting away every spare bill from my $900 a month Social Security check. I stopped buying meat, ate only ramen and vegetables, and turned off the lights early to save on electricity. I gathered $270 and went to the electronics store downtown. I wanted a new television. Mine, that heavy tube set we'd had since 1998, was barely watchable. The picture flickered, the colors were distorted, and sometimes it would just turn off by itself in the middle of the daytime soaps I watched to feel less alone. The salesman showed me a 32-inch flat screen with a modern remote and internet connection. "This is perfect for you, ma'am. You'll see everything crystal clear, just like at the movies." I felt silly for getting so excited over something so simple, but it was the first new thing I had bought for myself in years. I set it up in the living room, right in front of the sofa. That night I watched 3 shows in a row, marveling at the bright colors, at how sharp everything looked. I fell asleep with a smile on my face. 3 days later, Ryan showed up unannounced. He rang the doorbell at 10 in the morning. I was in the kitchen, baking cookies, my hands covered in flour. "Mom, I'm just here for a minute. Jessica needs some things you had in storage." I didn't understand what he was talking about. I let him in. He walked straight into the living room, looking around as if he were assessing a property for sale. He stopped in front of the television. "This is new." His tone wasn't one of joy or genuine interest. It was cold, calculating. "Yes, son, I bought it with my savings. The other one didn't work anymore." He nodded slowly, as if he were doing mental calculations. Then he went upstairs without asking for permission. I heard his heavy footsteps on the wooden floorboards, the sound of drawers opening, doors closing. He came down carrying old boxes, things that had belonged to my husband, tools, books, an antique lamp. "I'm taking this. You don't use it anymore." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. He went out to his pickup truck, loaded everything in, and came back with something heavy wrapped in a blanket. He set it down in the living room with a thud. "I'll be right back." He left without explaining anything. I stood there, confused, wiping my hands on my apron. Half an hour passed. When he returned, he was carrying tools. Without a word to me, he disconnected my new television, carried it carefully, and took it to his truck. Then he unwrapped what he had left. It was Jessica's old television, that monster with a scratched screen and a yellowed frame. He plugged it in where mine had been. That's when everything inside me exploded. Are you insane? Where is the television I bought last week? My voice came out broken, desperate. Ryan didn't even look at me. He put his tools away with slow movements. I took it for my wife. She deserves more than you. And stop being so dramatic. Go finish the meatloaf. He said it all without raising his voice, without getting upset, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. He gathered his things and walked toward the door. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling something inside me break into pieces so small I could never put it back together. The door closed. The truck's engine started, and I was left alone, in front of that hideous television, with the smell of burning cookies in the oven and tears stinging my eyes. I didn't know it then, but that humiliation would be the beginning of something much bigger, something neither of us could have imagined. The silence of the house was crushing me. I stood in front of that hideous television, with its scratched screen and distorted colors, unable to move. The meatloaf had burned in the oven, smoke filling the kitchen, but I just stood there, trying to understand what had just happened. My son, the child I had held in my arms, whom I had nourished with my own body, had just stolen from me. And worst of all, he did it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I sat down on the sofa and looked at the ceiling. The cracks my husband had always promised to fix were still there, silent witnesses to my life. I picked up the remote for that old set. It didn't work. I had to get up and press the buttons directly. The image flickered every few seconds. The actors' faces looked green, distorted. I tried to watch the news, but I couldn't concentrate. Every word Ryan had said pierced me like a knife. She deserves more than you. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 9 in the morning. I opened the door, and there he was again. But this time he wasn't alone. Jessica got out of the car, her heels clicking on the pavement, dragging a huge suitcase. She was wearing a salmon-colored dress, expensive sunglasses, and that look of superiority that always made me feel small. "Hello, mother-in-law." Her voice was sweet, fake, like poisoned honey. Ryan was carrying 2 more suitcases and a backpack. He dropped them in the entryway without looking at me. "Mom, we're going to stay here for a few days. The apartment we were renting has problems. A burst pipe, everything's flooded. 2 weeks, max, while they fix it." He didn't ask if they could stay. He didn't wait for my answer. He went up the stairs with the suitcases, Jessica behind him, inspecting every corner of my house as if she were in an antique museum. I stood at the door, my heart racing, wanting to say no, that this was my house, that they couldn't just invade my space. But the words got stuck in my throat. It was always the same with me. I always swallowed everything. They settled into the room that had been Ryan's when he was a boy. I made the bed for them with clean sheets, fresh towels, and even put fresh flowers on the nightstand. Jessica walked into the room, looked at everything with disdain, and said, "Don't you have better quality sheets? These feel rough." I didn't have any others. Those were the best I had. "Oh, well, I guess I'll have to put up with it." She threw herself onto the bed as if she were doing me a huge favor by staying. The next morning, I went downstairs at 6 to make breakfast. Freshly brewed coffee, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Jessica appeared at 8, with her hair wrapped in a towel, yawning. She looked at the plate I had served her and wrinkled her nose. "I don't eat eggs. Do you seriously not have any Greek yogurt? Organic granola? Almond milk?" I blinked, confused. I had never bought those things. "I have homemade bread. Strawberry jam I made last month." She sighed as if I had asked her to move a mountain. "Oh, for God's sake. Ryan, your mother lives in the last century. Let's go out for breakfast." But they didn't go out. Ryan just stared at his phone, ignoring her. Jessica ended up eating an apple, standing up, leaving the half-eaten core on the table. I cleaned everything up in silence. The 2 weeks they promised turned into 3, then 4. They spread through the house like a plague. Jessica's clothes appeared in my closet. "It's just that your room has better light, mother-in-law. Ours is so dark. You don't mind, do you?" She pushed my blouses to one side, hung up her 20 dresses, her 10 pairs of shoes. That night, I slept on the living room sofa. Ryan walked past me on his way to the kitchen. saw the folded blanket, the pillow, and said absolutely nothing. I became their maid. I washed their clothes, ironed Ryan's shirts, cleaned the bathroom after Jessica showered for an hour, leaving everything full of steam and expensive products. I cooked 3 meals a day. Jessica changed her mind every hour. I want pasta today. No, chicken is better. Do you have any salmon? No. Ugh, what a poor house. One afternoon I made a pot roast that Ryan used to love as a child. He took 1 bite and put his fork down. It's too heavy, Mom. I don't eat this stuff anymore. Jessica didn't even try it. They ordered takeout and ate in their room, leaving me with my pots full of food that nobody wanted. Jessica's friends started coming over. 3 women in designer clothes, laughing loudly, leaving their shopping bags on my sofa. I served them coffee, cookies I baked with the little money I had left. They ignored me as if I were a piece of furniture. One of them, a tall woman with extremely long, silver-painted nails, spilled her coffee on the embroidered tablecloth my grandmother had made by hand. Oh, sorry, but it was really old anyway. You should update your decor, ma'am. This looks like an old lady's house. They all laughed. Jessica laughed too. I picked up the stained tablecloth, tears burning my eyes, and locked myself in the kitchen so they wouldn't see me cry. One morning, Carol found me in the garden. I was trying to pull out the weeds that had grown wild because I no longer had time for anything. My knees ached, my back burned, but I stayed there, clinging to something I could still control. Eleanor. Her voice was soft, worried. I looked up. Carol was looking at me with those compassionate eyes that broke my heart. What's going on? You look thinner. I heard yelling last night. I forced a smile that hurt the muscles in my face. Everything's fine, Carol. Ryan and his wife are staying for a few days. You know how it is. She didn't believe me. I saw it in her expression. If you need anything at all, just knock on my door. I nodded, because if I opened my mouth to thank her, I was going to fall apart. Ryan started going through my things. I found him in my husband's study, opening drawers, looking through old papers. What are you doing? My voice came out stronger than I expected. He didn't even flinch, looking for documents. Dad had important things stored away. I need to see what's here. I felt a pang of anger. Those are private things. He looked at me the way you look at a foolish child. Mom, I'm his son. I have a right to know what he left. He slammed the drawer shut and walked out, leaving me standing there, trembling with helplessness. One evening, after serving the dinner they rejected because the meat was too tough, I went out to the backyard. The cold night air hit my face. I sat on the cement step, the one where my husband and I used to drink coffee on Sundays. I looked at the stars and let the tears fall. I cried for everything, for my television, for my bed, for my dignity. I cried until my whole body was shaking. And when I had no tears left, I wiped my face on the sleeve of my old sweater. Something strange happened then. Something small, but real. A part of me, buried under all the pain, began to wake up. It wasn't anger yet. It was something colder, more dangerous. It was clarity. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks in which I became a ghost in my own house. Ryan and Jessica moved through the spaces like owners, and I shrank more and more, taking up less space, breathing more slowly, half existing. I had stopped counting the days. I had stopped hoping they would leave. I had resigned myself to this new reality, where I was the unwelcome guest in the home I had built with my own hands. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning the attic, looking for more sheets because Jessica wanted to change them every day, I found a rusty metal box hidden behind some old suitcases. It was covered in dust, the lock broken. I didn't remember ever seeing it before. I dragged it toward the light coming through the small window. Inside were documents, yellowed papers, old photographs, and a sealed white envelope with my name written in my husband's shaky handwriting. For Eleanor, to be opened only after I'm gone. I sat on the dusty attic floor, my hands trembling. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it would disintegrate between my fingers. Inside was a letter, folded several times, and other, more formal documents with notary seals. I began to read. My beloved Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. Forgive me for not telling you this sooner. But I wanted to protect you, to surprise you when the right time came. That time never came, and now I must tell you like this. My heart was beating so hard I could feel the pulse in my temples. I kept reading. 20 years ago, when I was working in construction, I invested in something I never mentioned to you. I bought 3 commercial properties in the center of town. I rented them out all these years, and I saved the money in a separate account. I wanted to surprise you when I retired, to take you on a trip, to buy you everything we could never afford. But my time ran out before I could make it happen. Tears began to fall on the paper, smudging the ink. The documents are all there. The deeds, the rental agreements, the bank information. Everything is in your name. It always was. You are the owner of those properties. The money accumulated over these years is also yours. Use it well, my love. Live the life you deserve. Don't let anyone make you feel less than what you are. I went through the documents with trembling hands. Deeds for 3 commercial properties in a downtown shopping district. Current lease agreements. Bank statements from a bank showing monthly deposits for 20 years. I did some quick math in my head, adding, subtracting, unable to believe what I was seeing. There was more than $200,000 accumulated. $200,000 I didn't know existed. Properties that generated almost $3,000 a month in rent. I, who had been counting pennies to buy a television, who ate ramen and vegetables to save $5, was the owner of an estate that changed everything. I sat in that attic for hours, reading and rereading the letter, checking every document, making sure it wasn't a dream or a cruel joke of fate. Downstairs, I could hear the voices of Ryan and Jessica arguing about what to order for dinner, their laughter, the sound of the television that was once mine. And something inside me changed. It wasn't an explosive rage. It was something colder, more calculated. It was absolute clarity. I put everything back in the envelope, tucked it inside my blouse, and went downstairs, trying to maintain my composure. I walked past them without a word. Ryan didn't even look up from his phone. The next day, I looked through the documents for the name of the lawyer who had handled the properties. Arthur Vance. His office was downtown, a 40-minute bus ride away. I told Ryan I was going to the doctor. He barely nodded, more interested in the football game he was watching. I took the bus with the envelope clutched to my chest, as if it were a treasure. Arthur's office was in an old but well-maintained building. I climbed 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. I knocked on the door timidly. Arthur Vance was a man in his 60s, with thick glasses and a kind smile. When I showed him the documents, his expression changed completely. "Mrs. Eleanor, I've been waiting for this moment for months. I tried to contact you after your husband's passing, but the information I had was outdated. Your husband was very specific in his instructions. Everything was to be handed over to you directly." I sat across from his desk, still processing everything. "Is it real? All of this is mine?" He nodded seriously. "Completely yours. The properties have been in your name from the beginning. Your husband bought them using your identity as the owner to protect you legally. The tenants are up to date on their payments. The accumulated money is in an account that only you can access." We spent 3 hours going over every detail. Arthur explained everything patiently. The current contracts, the tax obligations, the options I had. "You can sell the properties if you wish. You can continue to rent them. You can do whatever you want. You are the absolute owner." I told him about my situation, without giving too many details, just enough for him to understand. "My son is living with me. I need to handle this discreetly." He understood perfectly. "We can set everything up through my office. No one needs to know anything until you decide to reveal it. Is there anything specific you want us to investigate?" I gave him Ryan's name. "I need to know his financial situation. I need to understand what's really going on." Arthur made a few calls while I waited. 20 minutes later, he had information that chilled me to the bone. Ryan had massive debts, maxed out credit cards, unpaid personal loans, 3 months of back rent on the apartment that was supposedly flooded. There was no flood. They had been evicted. "Your son is in a critical financial situation, Mrs. Eleanor. And there's more." Arthur showed me another document. The apartment he was renting, where he lived with his wife, is part of a building that... He paused, looking at me over his glasses. "It's one of the commercial properties you own. Technically, you are his landlord. The world stopped for a second. The entire building where Ryan had lived, where he had shown off so much, where he took my television to impress Jessica, belonged to me. He had been paying rent to me without knowing it. Or rather, he had stopped paying it. And that's why he was evicted. The building manager had been sending notices to my husband's account, which I never checked because I didn't know it existed. Arthur continued. The other tenants are current. Only your son has accumulated a debt of almost $5,000 in back rent. I left that office with a folder full of documents, a new checkbook, and a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. On the bus ride back, I looked out the window at the streets I had known my whole life. Everything looked different now. I was different. I was no longer the foolish old woman begging for a little respect. I was no longer the mother desperate for crumbs of affection. I was the owner of my destiny, and they had no idea. I got home at dusk. Ryan was eating pizza straight from the box, dropping pieces of cheese on my sofa. Jessica was painting her nails at the dining room table, the smell of polish filling the air. Where were you, mother-in-law? You didn't make dinner? I looked at her without answering. I went up to my room the room that was once mine, and put the documents in a safe place. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was no longer the same one who had been humiliated 6 weeks ago. This woman had a plan. And that plan was just beginning. The next few days were strange. I kept doing everything as before. I cooked, I cleaned, I shrank when they walked past me. But something fundamental had changed. Every insult from Jessica, every look of contempt from Ryan, every small humiliation no longer broke me. I saved them. I collected them like evidence. I had become a silent observer of my own destruction, but now I knew that this destruction was temporary. Now I had a secret that glowed inside me like a hidden ember. I went back to Arthur's office 3 times that week, always with different excuses. The doctor, the market, the pharmacy. Ryan never asked. He never cared enough. Arthur taught me things I never imagined I would need to know. How to read financial statements, how lease agreements worked, what my rights were as a property owner. I would sit in his office for hours, taking notes in an old notebook, absorbing every word. You have more power than you think, Mrs. Eleanor. You just need to learn how to use it. And I was learning. Fast. One afternoon, while we were reviewing the documents for the building where Ryan had lived, Arthur showed me something interesting. Your son signed a contract with a specific clause. If the apartment is abandoned with an outstanding debt, the owner has the right to retain any deposit and can also initiate legal action for the full amount owed plus interest. I looked at the numbers. $5,200 in back rent, $1,500 for the deposit that was already lost, more than $6,000 that Ryan owed me without knowing it. What can I do with this information? Arthur leaned back in his chair. For now, nothing. But it's good to know you have it. When the right moment comes, this document can be very useful. I started to change small things about my appearance. Nothing dramatic, just subtle adjustments. I went to a cheap salon and got my hair cut. I no longer wore it up in that tight bun that made me look older. Now it fell loosely on my shoulders, shorter, more modern. I bought 2 new blouses at a thrift store, nothing fancy, but with a better cut than my worn-out sweaters. When I came home with my different hair, Jessica looked me up and down. "Oh, mother-in-law, you cut your hair? It looks interesting." Her tone made it clear it was not a compliment. Ryan didn't even notice. But I did notice other things. I started paying attention to their conversations when they thought I wasn't listening. Ryan would talk on the phone in a low voice. Always nervous. Always lying. "Yes, the payment is coming next week. I promise. I just need a little more time," Jessica complained to her friends. "I don't know how much longer I can take this. Living with the old lady is hell, and Ryan isn't getting anywhere. He's had 3 job interviews and nothing. He says he's waiting for the right offer, but I think they just don't want to hire him." One of her friends responded, "So why don't you move out? Get your own place." Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "With what money? Ryan is broke. That's why we're here, trapped with his mother." Trapped. That word echoed in my head. They felt trapped with me. But the reality was the exact opposite. I had them exactly where I wanted them, even though they didn't yet know they were in a trap. One night, after they had fallen asleep, I went down to my husband's study. I turned on the old lamp and took out all the documents Arthur had given me. I spread them out on the desk: 3 properties, rental agreements, bank statements, evidence of Ryan's debts, photos I had discreetly taken of the conditions they had left my house in, stains on the walls, damaged furniture, the constant mess. I put together a complete file. I didn't know exactly what I would need it for, but I knew I would need it. Arthur suggested something that at first seemed extreme to me. You should consider making some legal changes. Updating your will, for example. Making sure your properties are protected. I had never thought about those things. Protected from whom? He looked at me with that expression he used when he was trying to tell me something difficult. From anyone who might try to claim them later. From family members who might feel entitled to what you've built. He didn't say Ryan's name, but we both knew who he was talking about. That afternoon, I signed new documents. A will that left everything clearly specified. Updated powers of attorney. Everything organized in a way that gave me absolute control. Carol continued to watch me from her garden. One morning, she stopped me as I was leaving. "Eleanor, you look different. I don't know what it is, but something about you has changed." I smiled, a genuine smile this time. "I'm okay, Carol. Better than I've been in a long time." She narrowed her eyes, studying me. "They're still living with you?" I nodded. "Yes, but not for much longer." I didn't say anything else, but Carol was smart. She nodded slowly. "If you need a witness for anything at all, you know where to find me." Those words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Someone was on my side. Someone saw what was happening. Ryan started to get more nervous. I noticed it in his movements. He checked the mailbox every day. He opened envelopes with trembling hands. He argued with Jessica in low, tense whispers. One afternoon, I found an opened envelope on the kitchen table. It was a collection letter. A credit card company was threatening to sue him for $22,000. $22,000 of debt I didn't know existed. I took a picture of the document with my new phone, the one I had bought with money from my newly discovered account. I saved the evidence. Everything was useful. Jessica started to pressure me in more direct ways. "Mother-in-law, don't you have some money saved up? Something my father-in-law left you?" I was peeling potatoes at the sink, keeping my hands busy so they wouldn't shake. "No, dear, just my Social Security, and you know that barely covers things." She clicked her tongue. "It's just strange. Such a big house, so many years married. There must be something." I looked her straight in the eye, holding her gaze until she looked away. If there were something, I would have already used it so I wouldn't have to count every penny at the market. That shut her up. For now. But I knew that eventually they would start looking more aggressively. Ryan had already gone through the study. Soon they would start digging in other places. I moved the important documents to a safe deposit box at the bank, under a name that only Arthur and I knew. At home, I left only copies, stored in places that seemed careless but were actually perfectly placed. If they found something, it would be exactly what I wanted them to find. One night, Ryan and Jessica had a huge fight. I was in my makeshift room, the small laundry room where I now slept because Jessica had also taken over the sofa for her beauty naps. I heard everything through the thin walls. "It can't go on like this, Ryan. We need money. Real money." Jessica's voice was hysterical. "I'm trying. What do you want me to do? Make it up? Your mother has this house. It has to be worth something. Make her sell it, or put it in your name." Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then Ryan's voice. Lower, more dangerous. "You're right. It's time we talk to her about that." I sat in the darkness of that tiny room, listening to their plans to strip me of the only thing they thought I had left, and I smiled. I smiled because they knew nothing. I smiled because every move they made gave me more reasons, more justifications, more evidence of who they really were. I smiled because the game was just beginning, and I was already several moves ahead. Tomorrow, I would go to see Arthur again. Tomorrow we would start the next phase. For now, I let them plan. I let them conspire. I let them feel clever. Because soon, very soon, They would learn that the woman they had underestimated for so long was the most dangerous person in their small world of lies. The conversation I had been dreading arrived 3 days later. Ryan asked me to sit down and talk. His tone was strangely formal, as if he were in a business meeting. Jessica sat beside him on the sofa, wearing that fake smile I knew so well. I took the old dining chair, the one that always creaked, and waited. My heart was beating fast, but I kept my face calm, my hands still in my lap. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind dozens of times. "Mom, we need to talk about your future." Ryan leaned forward, using that condescending tone adults use with children. "This house is too big for you. The upkeep must be exhausting. The stairs are dangerous at your age. We've been thinking that maybe it's time to sell." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "You could move into a smaller, more manageable place. A 1-bedroom apartment. You'd be much more comfortable." I watched them in silence, letting them continue. Ryan went on. "The money from the sale could help you live better. And well, it would also help us get back on our feet, as a family." There it was, the naked truth. They wanted me to sell my house to pay off their debts. They wanted to strip me of my home, the place where I built my life, where I raised my son, where I mourned my husband, and they were presenting it as a favor to me. I took a slow breath. And where would I live while the house is being sold? Ryan exchanged a look with Jessica. "You could stay with Carol temporarily, or find a cheap rental. It would only be for a few months." Jessica added, "It's for the best, mother-in-law, you'll see." I stood up calmly. "Let me think about it." Ryan frowned. "There's not much to think about, Mom. It's the logical decision. We can go see a real estate agent tomorrow." I shook my head. I said, "I'll think about it. It's my house. My decision." Ryan's expression changed. I saw a flash of anger in his eyes. "Mom, you're being selfish. We're offering you help, advice. And you? I will take my time to decide." My voice came out firmer than I expected. I walked to the kitchen, leaving them sitting there, surprised that the submissive old woman had finally said no. That night, things in the house changed. Ryan stopped pretending to be kind. Jessica stopped calling me mother-in-law in that syrupy voice. Now it was just ma'am, or they simply ignored me. Meals became tense. I would cook, serve, and they would eat in silence, shooting me resentful glances. One morning I came downstairs to find they had moved furniture. My husband's antique armchair was shoved into a corner in the garage. It was in the way, we moved it. Ryan didn't even look at me when he said it. Jessica had put her own photographs on the fireplace mantel, pushing mine aside. I went to see Arthur that same afternoon. I told him everything. He listened attentively, taking notes. "They're escalating. Soon they'll try something more drastic." I nodded. "I know. I can feel it." Arthur pulled out a new folder. "Then it's time for you to escalate as well. I have a proposal." We spent 2 hours reviewing options. There was a way to take complete control of the situation without them realizing it until it was too late. It will require patience. It will require you to keep acting as if you know nothing. You can do it. I looked him straight in the eye. I've been acting for 2 months. I can keep doing it for as long as it takes. The plan was simple but effective. I would continue to be the confused, vulnerable old woman. Meanwhile, Arthur would move the necessary legal pieces. First, we would update the contracts for my properties, making sure everything was ironclad. Second, we would begin the legal process to claim Ryan's debt for the back rent, but without notifying him yet. Third, we would document every bit of damage they had caused in my house, every insult, every abuse. "When the time comes," Arthur said, "you will have a solid case, not just to get your house back, but to ensure they face the consequences of their actions." Carol became my ally without me having to ask explicitly. She saw everything from her window, the times Ryan came home late and drunk, the violent fights between him and Jessica, the yelling that came from my house late at night. One afternoon, she brought me coffee and cookies. We sat in my backyard, away from prying ears. "Eleanor, what's happening here isn't right. I've been your neighbor for 20 years and I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" She squeezed my hand. "Defeated, but also different. Like you're planning something." I gave a small smile. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm tired of being the victim. Carol offered to document everything. She started taking discreet photos, when Ryan threw trash in my garden, when Jessica put my things out on the street as if they were garbage. She recorded a video of a particularly violent fight where Ryan smashed an antique lamp that had belonged to my mother. This is evidence. Keep it safe. She handed me a USB drive with all the material. If you ever need a witness, count on me. I will testify to what I've seen. Those words gave me a strength I didn't know I had. Ryan finally found a job, a temporary position in a warehouse, paying just $10 an hour. It wasn't enough to cover his debts, but it was something. Jessica celebrated by buying new clothes with a credit card that was surely already maxed out. Now we can finally get out of here, honey. We'll get our own apartment. I heard them making plans, dreaming of a future where I didn't exist. They didn't know that the apartment they longed for, any apartment they could afford in this city, would likely be in a building that belonged to me or to someone Arthur knew. One night, I decided to do something risky. Ryan was on his night shift. Jessica was out with her friends. I went up to what used to be my room, now completely invaded by their things. I searched carefully through their clothes, their drawers, without moving anything. I found what I needed. Financial documents they thought were hidden. Bank statements showing more debt than I imagined, $38,000 in total between credit cards, personal loans, and late payments. I took pictures of everything with my phone, put every paper back exactly where it was, and left the room without a trace. The next day, Arthur reviewed the photos. His expression was serious. "This is worse than we thought. Your son is on the verge of bankruptcy. Creditors are going to start coming after him soon. And when that happens, they will intensify the pressure on you to sell this house." I leaned back in his office chair, processing the information. "How much time do we have?" "A month, maybe 2. After that, things are going to get ugly." Then it was time to speed up the plan. It was time to move from defense to offense. Arthur made some calls. He contacted the manager of the building where Ryan had lived. "We want to initiate the formal collection process. Legal notices, everything in writing." Then he called a lawyer specializing in evictions. "I need you to prepare preventive documentation. If they refuse to leave the lady's property when requested, I want everything ready to proceed immediately." Every call, every document, every signature was another step toward my freedom. I was no longer the helpless old woman begging for respect. I was a woman with resources, with knowledge, with a precise plan. I returned home that afternoon with absolute clarity. Ryan was watching my television, which he had finally brought back after Jessica gave him a taste of her own medicine. He didn't even turn around when I came in. Jessica was in the kitchen, eating directly from the pot of stew I had prepared, not bothering to serve herself on a plate. "This is too salty, ma'am. You should learn to cook better." I looked at her. This woman who had invaded my life, who had mocked me, who had tried to steal my home. And I smiled. A small, calm smile that unnerved her. "You're right. I should improve many things." I turned and went upstairs, leaving her there with her fork halfway to her mouth, confused. That night, lying in my little laundry room, listening to their snores through the walls, I knew the moment was near. Very soon, everything they had built on lies and abuse would come crashing down. And I would be there, not to gloat, but simply to reclaim what was always mine, my dignity, my home, my life. The wait had been long, but it was about to end. The collapse began on a Tuesday morning. Ryan got a call while he was eating breakfast. I watched his face turn pale, his hand tremble as he held the phone. "What? No, there must be a mistake. I paid that months ago." But his voice didn't sound convincing, not even to himself. He hung up and stared at the wall, his eyes vacant. Jessica came into the kitchen, wrapped in her lavender silk robe. "Who was that?" Ryan didn't answer right away. "The credit card company. They're going to sue me if I don't pay $15,000 in the next 10 days. The silence that followed was heavy, toxic. Jessica exploded. $15,000? Where are we going to get $15,000? You said you had it under control. You said your job would fix everything." Ryan stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Shut up. You're not helping by yelling." I was still there, by the sink, washing dishes. invisible as always. But this time, I was listening to every word, etching them into my memory. Your mother has this house. Make her sell it already, or get a loan using the property. Ryan ran his hands through his hair. I already asked her. She refuses. She says she'll think about it. Jessica looked at me with pure hatred. Of course. The selfish little old lady would rather cling to her little house while her son drowns. I turned around slowly, drying my hands on a kitchen towel. I looked at them both. This house is all I have left. I'm not going to sell it because you two don't know how to manage your money. The words came out calm, firm. Jessica took a step toward me. You don't understand anything. You don't know what real life is, real stress. You've lived your whole life in this bubble, supported by your husband, without a care in the world. I laughed. A short, dry laugh that surprised them both. No cares? I worked cleaning houses for 20 years while your husband was in school. I skipped meals so he could eat. I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for his college. Don't talk to me about sacrifice when you know nothing about my life. Ryan stepped in, trying to de-escalate. Mom, please. We just need a loan. We use the house as collateral. We'll pay you back in 6 months. I shook my head. No. His expression changed. The mask of the concerned son fell away. Then you're forcing us to take other measures. I can have you declared incompetent. Say you're not fit to make decisions. There are nursing homes for people like you. Those words hit me like stones. Carol had warned me this might happen. Arthur, too. But hearing it from my own son's mouth was different. It was real. It was cruel in a way I couldn't have fully anticipated. Try it. My voice was barely a whisper, but there was steel in it. Try to have me declared incompetent. We'll see what a judge has to say. I left the kitchen, leaving them there, feeling their gazes fixed on my back. I went up to my old room, grabbed my purse, and walked out of the house. Ryan yelled something after me, but I didn't stop. I walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop with my heart beating wildly, not from fear, from rage, from determination. The time had come. I couldn't wait any longer. At Arthur's office, I told him everything. He listened with a grim expression. Threatening to have you declared incompetent is a desperate move, and a dangerous one. We have to act now. He pulled out documents he had been preparing. This is an eviction notice. Legal, formal, with all the necessary seals. It gives them 30 days to vacate your property. If they don't, the police can forcibly remove them. I looked at the paper. My name as the property owner. Ryan's name as the illegal occupant. The date. It was all there. Real. Final. Are you sure you want to do this? Arthur's question was serious. He's your son. This will sever any relationship that's left between you. I picked up the pen. He severed that relationship the day he swapped out my television as if I was worthless. What comes next is just a consequence. I signed the document with a steady hand. Arthur arranged for the notice to be delivered the next day. I also have this. He showed me another set of papers. The formal lawsuit for the back rent from the previous apartment. $6,200 plus interest and legal fees. Total, $8,400. The judge has already reviewed the case. It's solid. It's going forward. 2 simultaneous blows. Eviction and a lawsuit. Ryan wouldn't know what hit him. But there's more. His other creditors are also making moves. I've received information that 2 credit card companies are filing lawsuits this week. The bank that gave him the car loan is starting the repossession process. Everything is collapsing at the same time. Arthur looked at me with something akin to admiration. How do you feel? I thought about the question. Like I can finally breathe. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was justice. It was taking back control of my own existence. I returned home at dusk. The house was silent. Too silent. I found Ryan and Jessica in the living room, surrounded by papers, calculators, phones. They had been calling banks, relatives, anyone who might lend them money. From the looks on their faces, no one had agreed. Jessica's eyes were red from crying. Ryan looked like he had aged 10 years in one day. I walked past them without a word. Mom. Ryan's voice stopped me. I turned around. He was standing, his shoulders slumped, defeated. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I know we've been difficult, but I need your help. I really need it. For a moment, just one moment, I felt the urge to give in. He was my son. I had held him in my arms as a baby, had cleaned his scraped knees, had dried his tears. But then I remembered. He hadn't dried mine. He had caused mine. I can't help you, Ryan. My voice was soft but final. You've made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Jessica stood up. You are a bitter, cruel old woman. I hope you rot alone in this horrible house. I smiled sadly. I'd rather rot alone with my dignity than be humiliated with company. I went upstairs, leaving them in their desperation. The next morning, the process server arrived. I was making coffee when he knocked on the door. Ryan opened it, still in his pajamas. The man handed him an official envelope. Legal notice for Ryan Miller. Ryan signed for it, confused. He closed the door and opened the envelope right there. I watched his eyes scan the lines. Once. Twice. As if he couldn't believe what he was reading. It's an eviction notice. 30 days to vacate the property. His voice was incredulous. He looked at the owner's name. Eleanor Grace Miller? You? You're evicting us? Jessica snatched the paper from him. She read aloud. The legal owner of this residence requires the current occupants to vacate the premises within a period not to exceed 30 days. She looked at me with hatred. How dare you? I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. I dare because it's my house. It always was. You came without asking permission. You stayed without paying rent. You treated me like trash. It's over. Ryan approached, the paper crumpled in his hand. You can't do this. I'm your son. And I'm your mother. But that didn't give you the right to destroy me. The doorbell rang again. Another server. This time, with the lawsuit for the back rent. Ryan received the second envelope with trembling hands. When he opened it and saw the amount, his legs almost gave out. $8,400. For back rent from. He read the address, his old apartment. Then he saw the plaintiff's name, Eleanor Grace Miller. It's you. You own the building where we lived. It was all starting to click in his mind. The sudden eviction, the flood that never happened. It had all been because he owed money. To me. He owed me money without even knowing it. Jessica let out a cry of frustration. This is impossible. You don't own property. You're a poor old woman who counts pennies. I stood up, leaving my cup on the table. You believed what you wanted to believe. You saw what was convenient for you to see. But you never asked. You never cared enough to know who I really was. Ryan sank onto the sofa, the two legal documents in his lap. How long? How long have you known? Long enough. Long enough to understand exactly who you are. And who you stopped being. Carol knocked on the door at that moment. She walked in with a folder under her arm. I came to drop this off. Photographic documentation and recordings from the last 2 months. Just in case they're needed for the legal process. She handed the folder to Ryan. He opened it and saw the photos. The damage to my house. His tantrums. The violence. His face completely fell apart. The game was over. And he finally understood that he never had a chance of winning. The following days were a descent into chaos. Ryan stopped going to work. He would sit in the living room for hours, staring into space, with those legal papers scattered around him like evidence of his own ruin. Jessica oscillated between fury and tears. 1 hour she would scream that it was all my fault, that I was a vengeful old hag. The next hour she would pack her bags, swearing she was leaving. But she never left. She had nowhere to go. Neither of them did. The calls began to pour in, creditors looking for Ryan at all hours. The house phone rang constantly. He stopped answering after the 3rd day. I, however, would answer. Ryan Miller's residence. He's not available. Would you like to leave a message? I noted down every call, every company, every amount owed. The list grew. $43,000 in total. $43,000 from a life built on credit and lies. One afternoon, 2 men arrived with a tow truck. They took Ryan's car. He ran out of the house, shouting, trying to stop them. You can't do this. I need that car for work. One of the men showed him the papers. 3 months of non-payment. The bank is repossessing the vehicle. It's all legal. Ryan was left on the street, watching them drive away with his last symbol of success. Jessica blamed Ryan for everything. Their fights became more violent, more cruel. I told you to get money. I told you to do something. But no. You'd rather steal a television from your mom like a pathetic thief. Ryan yelled back. You were spending like we were millionaires. Your $500 shoes, your expensive dinners, all to impress your stupid friends. The neighbors started to hear. Carol wasn't the only witness now. The whole block knew something serious was happening at Eleanor's house. I maintained my routine. I cooked my food, cleaned my spaces, went for walks in the afternoon. I no longer cooked for them. I no longer cleaned up their messes. They were no longer my guests. Now they were just squatters, awaiting their inevitable departure. One night, Ryan knocked on the door of my small laundry room. I was reading a book Arthur had lent me on personal finance. Can I come in? His voice was different, broken, small. I nodded without saying anything. He came in and sat on the floor, because there were no chairs. He just sat there, his back against the wall, looking at his hands. I don't know how I got here. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I had a good job 2 years ago, a nice apartment. Jessica was happy. Everything seemed to be working. And then I started spending more than I earned. Little by little, a card here, a loan there. I thought there would always be more money, that I could always fix it. And me? My voice cut through the air. At what point did you decide I was disposable? He looked up. His eyes were red. When Dad died, I saw you as so small, so lost. I thought you needed someone to take control, that I should make the decisions for you. I laughed humorlessly. Take control? You stole from me. You humiliated me. You treated me like a servant in my own house. That wasn't protection. That was abuse. He wiped his face on his sleeve. I know. God, I know. Jessica was constantly pressuring me. She said you had hidden resources, that you were just stingy. I wanted to believe her because it was easier than accepting I had ruined my own life. Jessica didn't hold a gun to your head. You chose to believe her because it suited you. Ryan nodded slowly. You're right. And now I've lost everything. The car, the job I stopped going to, the few friends I had, and you. Most of all, you. He stood up with difficulty. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but is there any way to fix this? Anything I can do? I looked at him for a long moment. You can leave. You can get out of my house, out of my life, and find your own way, without using my resources, without expecting me to rescue you. That's the only thing you can do. He nodded, defeated, and left the room. I closed my book and turned off the light. His regret came too late. The damage was already done. Jessica left first. One morning, while Ryan was asleep, she packed all her things into trash bags. She called a friend to pick her up. Before she left, she came to find me. I was in the garden, pruning the roses I finally had time to care for. This is your fault. Her voice trembled with rage. You destroyed our marriage. You ruined everything. I straightened up, the pruning shears still in my hand. I didn't spend your money. I didn't rack up your debts. I didn't force you to treat an old woman like trash. You did all those things on your own. She took a step toward me. Ryan is weak. He always was. You raised him that way. Dependent, useless. I raised him with love, with sacrifice. I gave him everything I could. He chose what to do with it. Just like you chose to marry him for his money, and now you're abandoning him because the money is gone. Jessica clenched her fists. I hope you end up completely alone. I hope you die alone in this horrible house with no one to mourn you. I smiled sadly. I would rather die alone with dignity than live accompanied and destroyed. Now leave. Your friend is waiting. She turned and left, dragging her bags down the driveway. She never looked back. The car started and disappeared down the street. Part of the weight on my chest lifted. One less nightmare. Ryan found the note Jessica left that afternoon. I heard him sobbing from his room. I didn't go to comfort him. It was no longer my job to fix his emotional messes. That night, he came downstairs with a suitcase. "I'm leaving tomorrow." His voice was dull. "A cousin in another city offered me his couch while I look for work. It's not much, but it's something." I nodded. "Okay." He was waiting for me to say more, to offer him money, to beg him to stay, to forgive him, but I just kept washing my dishes, my back to him. "Mom." His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." I turned and looked at him. My son, the boy who had been my entire world, now a stranger with the face of someone I once loved. "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry things ended this way. But I can't save you, Ryan. Not anymore. You have to save yourself." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Will you ever be able to forgive me?" The question hung in the air. "I don't know. Maybe. When you truly understand what you did. When you're not just sorry because you lost, but because you comprehend the pain you caused." I left the dishes. I dried my hands and walked toward him. For a moment, he thought I was going to hug him, but I just passed him and went up the stairs. "Make sure you leave the keys before you go." The next day, at 6 a.m, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. The front door opened and closed. I looked out my bedroom window. Ryan was walking down the street with his suitcase, hunched under the weight of his failure. A taxi stopped. He got in. The car drove away. And just like that, after 2 months of hell, my house was mine again. I sat on my bed and breathed. A deep, clean, free breath. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't scare me. The silence was peace. Carol came over that afternoon with a homemade apple pie. We sat in my yard, drinking tea, not talking much. She understood I didn't need words, just quiet company. "How do you feel?" she finally asked. I thought about the answer. Empty. But it's a clean empty. Like when you finish cleaning a room that's been dirty for years, it hurts a little, but it also feels good. She squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing. It was brave." I shook my head. It wasn't bravery. It was survival. I couldn't keep being invisible in my own life. That night, I walked through my house, room by room, touching the walls, looking at every corner. It was mine again, completely mine. I went up to my old room. The bed was unmade. Jessica's things were still scattered about. I started to clean. I took out every piece of clothing that wasn't mine. I washed the sheets. I threw the windows wide open to let in fresh air. I worked until midnight, and when I was done, I stood in the center of that clean, orderly, reclaimed room, and I cried. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of liberation. I had survived. I had won. And now, finally, I could start to live again. 3 weeks passed since Ryan left. 3 weeks of silence that at first scared me and then healed me. I woke up every morning without the knot in my stomach, without the fear of what new insult I would hear, what new humiliation would come. The house breathed differently. I breathed differently. I hired someone to repair the damages. The stains on the walls, the broken lamp, the scratched floor. Little by little, my home was becoming what it had been, a place of peace. Arthur called one morning. "I have news about your son." My heart sped up involuntarily. "Is he okay?" There was a pause. "Physically, yes. He's living with his cousin in another city, working at a gas station. But there's something else. Jessica filed for divorce. And she's asking for financial compensation, claiming Ryan deceived her about his financial situation." I closed my eyes. Another blow from my son. "Does he know?" "Yes. He received the papers yesterday. His cousin contacted me asking for pro bono legal advice. I explained I couldn't help due to a conflict of interest, but I gave him the names of some lawyers who might guide him. I didn't feel satisfaction, just a deep weight in my chest. Does she have a case? Arthur sighed. Probably. There are documents showing that Ryan hid his debts during their engagement, but Jessica isn't innocent either. She spent just as much as he did. A judge will have to decide. I thanked him for the information and hung up. I sat in my living room, on the sofa that no one else claimed now, and thought about my son. Shattered, getting divorced, working for minimum wage. Part of me, That part that would always be his mother, wanted to call him, to send him money, to rescue him one last time. But I didn't. He needed to hit rock bottom. He needed to rebuild himself from there. Carol invited me to her house for dinner. Her husband, Don Miller, a quiet but kind man, cooked his famous paella. We ate in their garden, under the colorful lights strung through the trees. "You look different, Eleanor," Carol said, pouring me more wine. "Younger, like you've shed 20 years. Don Miller nodded. "Stress ages you. Peace rejuvenates you." We toasted to that. To peace, to second chances, to women who learn to defend themselves when no one else will. I started doing things I had put off for years. I signed up for a painting class at the community center, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. At first, my paintings were clumsy, childish. But the teacher, a young woman with purple hair and a patient smile, encouraged me. "Don't look for perfection, look for expression." I painted my garden. I painted the hydrangeas where my husband fell. I painted the view from my window. Every brushstroke was therapy. Every color was an emotion I could finally express without words. One afternoon, while I was painting in my yard, a certified letter arrived. I recognized it immediately, the logo of the law firm representing Jessica. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a subpoena. Jessica was calling me as a witness in her divorce. She wanted me to testify about Ryan's financial situation, his behavior, everything I had seen. I called Arthur immediately. "Do I have to go?" "Legally, yes. But you can testify to what you believe is fair. No one can force you to lie, but you can't refuse to testify if you're subpoenaed." The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I put on my best dress, a cream-colored one I had bought for my husband's funeral and hadn't worn since. Arthur accompanied me to the courthouse. The room was small, cold, impersonal. Jessica was there with her lawyer, a tall woman in a black suit with a hard expression. Ryan was on the other side, with a public defender who looked too young to be there. When he saw me enter, Ryan turned pale. Our eyes met for a second. I saw a plea in his eyes, but I didn't know what he was pleading for me to defend him or for me to tell the truth. They called me to the stand. I swore to tell the truth. Jessica's lawyer began. "Mrs. Miller, are you the mother of the respondent?" "Yes." "Can you tell us what you observed about your son's financial situation during his marriage?" I took a deep breath. My son had significant debts that he hid. He spent money he didn't have. He used credit cards to their limits. He lost his apartment for non-payment. Jessica was smiling. Her lawyer continued. "And was Mrs. Jessica Miller aware of these debts?" I looked at my former daughter-in-law. Not at first. But eventually, yes. And yet, she continued to spend. She bought expensive clothes, went out to expensive restaurants. She lived beyond her means as well. Jessica's smile vanished. Her lawyer frowned. "Are you saying my client contributed to the financial situation?" "I'm saying they both lived in a fantasy. They both spent money they didn't have. They both lied. They are both responsible." The judge, an older man with bifocals, looked at me with interest. "Please continue, ma'am." "My son lied to me. He stole from me. He humiliated me. But his wife encouraged him. She pressured him. Together, they turned my home into a living hell while trying to maintain an image of success that wasn't real." Ryan's lawyer, surprised by my balanced testimony, chose not to question me. The judge thanked me for my statement and dismissed me. I left that room feeling a weight lifted. I had told the truth. I didn't protect Ryan, but I didn't destroy him any more than he already was. In the hallway, Ryan caught up to me. "Mom, wait." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "Thank you, for not lying, for not completely destroying me." I finally looked at him. He had lost weight. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were clean but old, worn. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was the right thing to do." He nodded. "I know. Can I call you sometime? When I fixed my life. When I'm someone you can be proud of." Tears threatened to spill, but I held them back. "You can. But don't call me to ask for money or help. Call me when you've truly learned who you are and who you want to be." He wiped his eyes. "I will. I promise." I walked away without looking back. Arthur was waiting for me at the exit. 3 months later, I received a call. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Mom? Ryan's voice sounded different, more mature. Hello. There was an awkward silence. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that. I got a better job. In a logistics office. It's not a big deal, but it's honest. I'm starting to pay off my debts. Little by little. I felt something loosen in my chest. I'm glad. And I'm going to therapy. Twice a week. Learning about why I did what I did. Why I hurt you. My voice cracked a little. That's good, Ryan. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Not now. I know it's too soon. But someday, I looked out the window. My garden was blooming. The roses I had pruned were growing back. Stronger. Forgiveness isn't something you give all at once. It's something you build. With time. With actions. With real change. I understand. I'll keep working on myself. And when I'm ready, if you're ready, I'd like to visit. Just to have coffee. To talk. Like before. Like before doesn't exist anymore, Ryan. But maybe we can build something new. Different. More honest. He let out a shaky sigh. That's more than I deserve. Thank you, Mom. Take care, son. You too. I hung up and stood there, the phone in my hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would go back to being perfect, but the realistic hope that maybe, just maybe, something broken could eventually heal. But with no rush, no pressure, just with time and truth. That night, I cooked my favorite dinner. Herb roasted chicken, roasted potatoes, fresh salad. I set the table nicely, with my grandmother's embroidered tablecloth that had survived the wine stain. I lit candles. I poured wine. And I ate alone. But I didn't feel lonely. I felt accompanied by myself, by the woman I had become, the woman who had learned to defend herself, the woman who had taken her life back. I raised my glass to the sky, to my husband who had left me those properties, that legacy, that second chance. Thank you, my love, for protecting me even after you were gone. And I drank, savoring the wine, savoring the freedom, savoring the life that was finally, completely mine. A year later, my life was unrecognizable. Not because everything had changed dramatically, but because I had learned to truly inhabit it. I woke up every morning without fear. I ate breakfast in my kitchen, watching the sun stream through the clean windows. I tended my garden, which now bloomed with colors I hadn't seen in years. The hydrangeas grew enormous, the roses climbed the fence, and I would spend hours there, my hands in the dirt, feeling like I had finally put down roots in my own existence. My painting classes became more than a hobby. The teacher suggested I participate in a community exhibition. At first, I laughed. Me, exhibiting my paintings? But she insisted. Your work has soul, Eleanor. People need to see that. I ended up agreeing. On the opening night, Carol and Don Miller came with me. My paintings hung on a small wall. My garden, the view from my window, a portrait of my husband I had painted from memory. A young woman stopped in front of one showing an empty house with a single light on. This one makes me feel something deep, she said, like loneliness, but also like hope. I smiled. That's exactly it. Arthur became more than my lawyer. He became my friend. We had lunch once a month, talking about everything: his grandchildren, my paintings, life in general. You know what impresses me most about you? He said one day, as we shared enchiladas at his favorite restaurant. What's that? That you didn't become bitter. You had every right to become a person full of hate after what you went through. But you chose to heal. I shrugged. Hate is too heavy. I carried enough for a long time. I prefer to be light now. My properties continued to generate income. $3,000 a month, which I now used consciously. I donated a portion to a shelter for battered women. For those who need to know there's a way out, I told the coordinator when I handed over the first check. She hugged me with tears in her eyes. You have no idea how many lives you will change with this. But I did know. Because mine had changed. I saved another part of the money for emergencies. And the rest, I used to live. Not luxuriously, but comfortably. I bought new books. I updated my wardrobe with clothes I liked, not just what was on sale. I allowed myself small indulgences. Good coffee, fresh flowers every week, a subscription to a classic movie service. Ryan called every 2 months. Short, careful conversations. He told me about his work, his therapy, the books he was reading to better understand himself. He never asked for money. He never asked about the properties or my financial situation. He just talked about his process. I'm learning that being a son didn't give me the right to destroy you. That real love doesn't demand sacrifice to the point of annihilation. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced them with his therapist. But at least he was saying them. At least he was trying. 10 months after he left, he asked if he could visit. Just for a day, a few hours, to show you who I'm trying to be. I hesitated. Carol advised me, listen to your gut. If you're not ready, it's okay to say no. But something in me, something small but real, wanted to give him that chance. Okay, but just a few hours, and no drama. No drama. I promise. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon. He took the bus from his city. A 4-hour trip. I saw him get off at the corner of my street, carrying a small backpack. He had lost more weight. His clothes were simple. Jeans, a denim shirt, worn sneakers. But he was clean, shaven, and there was something different in his eyes. Humility. Real humility. He knocked on the door instead of just walking in. He waited for me to open it. Hi, Mom. Hello, Ryan. I made coffee. We sat in the yard, in the same chairs where I had once cried out my pain. He looked around. The garden looks beautiful. You were always good at making things grow. I didn't answer, letting him continue. I want to start by saying I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness. Well, I did, but I don't expect you to give it. He took a breath. I came to show you that I get it, that I understand what I did. Not just the actions, but the damage. The real, deep damage I caused you. I drank my coffee in silence. My therapist had me write a list of all the times I hurt you. There are 83 specific moments where I chose my comfort over your dignity. He took a notebook out of his backpack. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I want to read one, the first one, the day of the television. He opened the notebook with trembling hands. Number 1. I entered your house without permission. I took something you had bought with your savings, with money you had sacrificed to put away. I replaced it with an old piece of junk. And when you confronted me, I told you that my wife deserved more than you. That sentence. That damn sentence. His voice broke. I told you that you were worth less than an object, less than my convenience, and I did it with a coldness that now shames me to my very soul. He closed the notebook. Tears were streaming down his face. That was just the first one. The other 82 are just as horrible. And I wrote them all down because I need to face what I did, not hide behind I was stressed or Jessica pressured me. I did it. I destroyed you. I remained quiet for a long moment, staring at my coffee, at the roses, at anything but him, because if I looked at him, I would break, and I had broken enough for this man. Do you know what the worst moment was for me? I finally spoke. It wasn't the television. It wasn't when you kicked me out of my room. It was when you threatened to have me declared incompetent, because that's when I knew you were willing to steal not just my things, but my autonomy, my right to exist as a person. Ryan sobbed. I know. That's on the list. Number 47. I don't want to hear the number. I want to know if you've really changed, or if you're just saying what you think I want to hear. He wiped his face on his sleeve. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm trying. I work at it every day. I pay my debts, little by little. I go to therapy. I read. I think. I try to be better, but I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it will ever be enough to make up for what I did. I finally looked at him, my son, the boy I had loved with every fiber of my being, the man who had shattered me, and the human being who now stood before me, broken but trying to piece himself back together. It's not about making up for it. You can't make up for that pain. But you can choose to be different from now on. Not necessarily with me, but with yourself. With the people who come into your life. You can choose to never be that man again. Ryan nodded slowly. Do you think we could ever have a relationship? Not like before. I know that died. But something new? Something honest. I thought about that question for a long time. Maybe. But it's going to take years. And it's going to require you to keep doing this work. You can't just show up once, cry, and expect everything to be forgiven. I understand. And I need you to understand something too. I'm not the woman I was. I will no longer sacrifice myself for you. I will no longer put your needs above my own. If we build something again, it will be between two adults with clear boundaries. Can you accept that? Yes, I can. I want that. I need that. We spent 2 more hours talking, not about the past, but about the present, his new logistics job, my painting classes, the simple lives we were both learning to live. When it was time for him to go, I walked him to the door. Thank you for having me. I nodded. Call in 2 months. We'll talk. We'll keep building. Slowly. He smiled sadly. Slowly is good. Slowly is fine. I watched him walk down the street, his silhouette shrinking in the distance. I didn't feel the unconditional love of before, but I felt something like compassion, and that was a start. That night, I sat in my new rocking chair, in my clean and tidy living room, with a warm cup of chamomile tea in my hands. I thought about the entire journey, from the lost widow I was a year ago, to the woman I was now, independent, strong, the owner of her own life. I looked at the photograph of my husband on the mantel. I made it, my love. I survived. And I didn't just survive. I learned to live again. I took a sip of my tea and closed my eyes. For the first time in over a year, I felt completely at peace. The final lesson had come in the most painful way possible. Sometimes, self-love means letting go. Letting go of expectations of what should have been. Letting go of the people who hurt us, even if they're family. Letting go of the version of ourselves that existed only to serve others. And in that letting go, in that void that at first is terrifying, you find the space to fill yourself with what you truly deserve. Respect, peace, dignity. The television had been just the beginning, a small spark that ignited a fire that burned away everything false, everything toxic, everything that kept me chained. And from those ashes, like the roses in my garden after being pruned, something new had grown, something stronger, something indestructible. I had grown. And that, finally, was enough. I forgave myself for taking so long to stand up for myself. And in that forgiveness, I found the greatest freedom of all.